Tucked away in this South Tulsa neighborhood is the home and studio of one of the area's premier fine artists, Robb. Herb's also known for his large murals and other civic projects. I'm Barbara Cohenauer. Stay tuned as Focus on Art visits with Robb. One of the things about Robb's studio is that it's also his family home, so it's a wonderful place for him to do his work every day. Good morning, Herb.
Hi, Barbara.
Welcome to Focus on Art. You've been here before, so we appreciate having you back again.
Well, it's a pleasure to be back again.
And what a wonderful place to get up in the morning to go to work, here in your family room with your computer and your coffee pot. And
it's great. It's what I like best. Being able to just step out of the bedroom and come in here and start working is ideal.
Great. Now, around you in your home here, you have many of your works of art. And so by just kind of looking really through your home and studio, I think we can give our viewers a very good idea of Robb, what he does as an artist and who he is as an artist. And then at the end of the program, we're going to take off to Greater Downtown Bristow to see one of your murals that's been installed.
That sounds great.
Okay, let's start, why don't we, with this painting over the fireplace. I know this is a rather recent one, so why don't you kind of tell us a little bit about what you're doing here and what you're thinking about?
Well, this painting was inspired by the doll specifically. My grandmother made the doll for my great aunt when she was a little girl, and my great aunt happened to be born on the same day that I was born on, so I inherited the doll.
Okay.
And the license plate is from the same period, and so is the quilt, and the old spools of thread are from that period. So it has, all the objects in there have special meaning to me. They probably may not look related to some, but for me, they are tied together.
Okay, and so this is a painting that has particular significance to your family. I would assume that that's always going to hang over the fireplace. That's not one that you're going to be selling in a gallery.
I'm planning to do a series of pieces with that doll, so it's possible that I might eventually sell that and do another one.
Okay. Now, I know that you really are a fine artist. Early in your career, you did a lot of commercial art projects. Herb, are you doing many of those anymore? Are you really just into the fine arts area?
There's just a few projects that I'm doing that you could call commercial, and they're really religious pieces that I'm doing with a priest who's a good friend of mine, Father Tim Daly. A mural, a tile mural, and I'm also working on some metal crosses for a church in Tulsa. But other than those two projects, I really have gotten completely away from commercial work at this point, and I'm just doing painting and teaching.
Okay, you have students that actually come to your home here.
Right.
And they work back in the studio rather than in here in the family room.
Well, that's the way I studied in New York. I had a teacher in New York named Michael Aviano, and we would go over to his apartment to study, and we would be there for 3 hours, and sometimes his studio would fill up and we would spill out and set up easels in his living room.
Okay.
And actually end up working out there. So, and I really liked that. I liked the casual setting, and I liked his one-on-one workings with the students and the openness of his studio. I've worked with other teachers. My first teacher never let anybody in her studio. So to me, to open up the studio to the students really gives them some terrific insights that helps them.
Herb, are you having high school students, adults? Who is your group of students?
I actually have students that run from the ages of 13 to, I've had people in their 80s, but okay. I have 2 or 3 people in their 70s right now.
Wonderful. Well, I know that your work includes all kinds of subject matter. We've seen the doll here. You have a couple of landscapes over here on the wall. Why don't we take a look at those?
Sure. When I'm not doing still life, I really enjoy getting out and painting on location. And this, of course, is Cathedral Rock in Sedona, and I was on vacation there not long ago and went out and worked on this a couple mornings in a row, and then came back and did a little bit more work on it in the studio. It's probably got maybe 5 hours on location and another 4 hours back here.
Okay, well, it's a wonderful painting. I'm particularly fond of areas like this down here at the bottom, where you have these build-ups of paint, many different colors, one over the other.
A lot of optical blending going on, where you see these little spots of color next to each other, and they wind up merging visually when you get a distance away from the painting. And when you get up close to it, they almost sparkle because there's so much variation going on in texture and in color.
Do I hear something here that's reminding me of the word impressionism?
Well, I hope so. I like to work in different styles and explore different approaches, but I'm very influenced by Impressionism, and specifically the optical blending.
Okay.
And sometimes I like to work very pointillistically almost, but on the other hand, there are paintings that we'll see later that look maybe like they may be more influenced by realism.
Maybe this next one down here actually is, to me, appears to be a little less impressionistic and perhaps a little more in the realist vein.
Yes, I would say so. You'll notice that in some cases, for example, the walls of the adobe don't look particularly impressionistic, but the tree in the background does. So I blend passages. I'll have areas that I do work one way and areas that I work another way. And that way I feel like rather than trying to work within a style, I am responding to my subject.
Makes sense to me, taking the best of all worlds.
Right.
Well, now, Herb, when you started out, you studied in New York and had a very classical kind of education for a fine artist.
Right. I felt I needed to get a strong background in drawing and in light and shade, and that was obviously a good place to go to get it. And it was also a wonderful education for me otherwise. But recently, and over the last, say, 15 years, I've slowly migrated towards impressionistic work. But even back as far as 1980, you remember I showed you the mural that I did at the Central Library in downtown Tulsa. And it was already leaning towards Impressionism. So I've always been drawn to it, and I've always liked it. And I've found that it's a real pleasure to work with it because it gives you some opportunities to explore color that you don't have in realism.
Okay. Now, as I came down the hall past the front door, I noticed that you did have a painting hanging in your front hall, which looked to me like it was probably one of your earlier paintings because it shows a little bit more of that classical education, that classical background.
The portrait.
Yes, why don't we take a look at that? Well, Herb, the obvious place to begin talking about a portrait, of course, is with the subject.
Right. This is one of my former students, or it's one of my former students modeled for it. Her name is Carolyn Howie. And I did this as a demo for a class. I actually did it in the living room. We set up in there, and I'd always wanted to do a painting of a gypsy. I love character portraits. And so we dressed her up in kind of a gypsy type outfit, and I went for a real festive background. And this painting probably has about 30 hours in it. That's more than I usually spend on it. I've started working quite a bit faster than that now.
Okay, well, it's certainly a beautiful painting. Now, I imagine we're probably picking up a little bit of glare from our camera lights because the paint is so thick on this particular painting.
And the varnish, but there is quite an impasto on here. As you can see, there's strokes that are quite heavy, especially in the lighter areas. Now here I used it in a dark area, and typically I don't do that, but I discovered that the little planes that were created by the paint as I built it up caused reflections to take place that looked to me like reflections on her eyeball. So I decided to kind of break a rule there.
Well, it certainly gives it a lifelike appearance, and I think that's what everybody strives for in portraits, is not a picture of someone, but rather a picture that looks like it's alive and really tells the character of the person. A very strong portrait. I love her lifted chin and the kind of almost haughty
She has an attitude, doesn't she?
attitude that she has in the painting, and the way you were able to bring that off was certainly a gorgeous painting. And I like the lively and colorful background too. So how long ago did you do this?
This is about almost 3 years old.
Okay, so, but it kind of represents that earlier, more classical approach, at least in subject matter.
That's right. It's, again, kind of a blend, like the little adobe scene that we just looked at. It's got areas that are pretty classical in their approach, and then other areas like the background that are really more like Impressionism.
Okay, now I know that you've always loved to do still life. Mm-hmm. And I can appreciate that because I like the still life too. And it's kind of interesting when you think about art history, the number of years that still life paintings were considered of a lower class. Good painters didn't paint still lifes, and now, what would you say, probably since the 17th century Dutch painters, the still life has become a very acceptable kind of subject. And this is a lovely one.
Thank you. This one is maybe perhaps a little more impressionistic than the last piece we looked at. It's got some good optical color blending going on in several areas. That picture belonged, again, to my grandmother, and so I call this piece Grandma's Picture.
Good title there.
Thanks. And I've used it in several pieces. I really enjoy the picture. It's got a real challenging shape to it.
Well, it's just great. And this is one that you've did in a shorter length of time, not 30 hours in this particular painting.
That's right. This piece is probably, under 10 hours.
Okay. Let's go to the studio and see where you create these paintings.
Okay. You just step this way.
Well, we'll start here, Herb, and look at some paintings that you did. Oh, there's my coffee. And then we'll look at some of your student work.
Great. This is a very recent piece. I just did this in Woodward Park when the azaleas were in bloom. And very rapid piece. I did that in one afternoon. Really enjoyed it. It was a gorgeous day. And I enjoyed standing on that path in the shadows and really got a kick out of seeing the filtering light coming through the leaves.
Well, now, while we're looking at that, Herb, I think it's probably an ideal time to mention your association with the Oklahoma Society of Impressionists. And looks to me like you might have had that organization in mind when you painted that particular painting.
I sure did, and this piece was recently shown in an Oklahoma Society of Impressionists exhibit at F&M Bank. I've been with OSI for roughly 3 years now. Gary Moeller got me involved along with Wanda Brown, who's been on your show, and I've really enjoyed it. It's a wonderful chance to spend time with contemporaries and work towards marketing our work and educating the public in regard to Impressionism.
Well, now, you know, you look at a painting like this, and I think we obviously say Impressionism, but that's not really what all Impressionist paintings have to look like, historically.
Right. You know, the classical idea of Impressionism is what Monet did, for example. Everybody is familiar with, or a lot of people are familiar with the water lilies, and that's what they have in their head as to what Impressionism is. But you can think also of Seurat, who did very tiny, pointillistic type applications of paint, and go all the way to really realism was nearly included in the original shows of the Impressionists, which were represented in a show that was here in the United States. It was in New York and it was in San Francisco, and I happened to be fortunate enough to see it when it was in San Francisco and picked up this catalog. But the show was of the paintings from the Impressionist years from 1874 to 1886, and it has, you can see lots of examples in here of work that people would not normally consider to be Impressionistic type works. Historically, realists and impressionists have always shown together, and the realists were included as part of the impressionist movement.
Okay. What tied them to the impressionists then? The joy of working outside, the free spirit that we think of with impressionism?
Well, I'm sure that would be part of it. I think that they shared a sense of needing to capture the sense of light and atmosphere,
Okay.
for one thing, but I also think that they were trying to seek their own way and not be limited to the existing venues for work, and that they provided moral support for each other.
Okay, and I think that's what we see in the Oklahoma Society of Impressionists.
Very much
It's kind
so.
of a variety of styles. You had a magazine laying here that I wanted to pick up and bring to the attention of our viewers. This is the Artist magazine, and this is their 10th anniversary issue.
January of this year, right?
And on the inside here, tell us about this article and this particular illustration down here in the corner of the page.
Well, they had several articles in this issue that all revolved around the idea of 10, because it was their 10th anniversary. And these are 10 pieces that they have published over the last 10 years that they say they can't forget. And if you don't mind, I'll
Please,
read
go
the
ahead.
little caption here. It says, "Over the years, we've brought you artists who have painted, snipped, pounded, and even planted their way to fame, or at least notoriety. Their work has never ceased to inspire and amaze us. And it's often made us look again at what we call art. Here's a gallery of our favorites." And I was happy to see that they had included our piece that was done when I was teaching out at Rogers State College of Will Rogers, done in soda cans.
Okay, the great pop can mural certainly made and left a lasting impression at Rogers State College. That mural was, what, about 15 feet in each direction?
Right, roughly.
And hung on Barrett Hall for quite a while, with the pop cans, each one presenting a new color or a new idea.
And is definitely tied to the idea of Impressionism, because obviously the cans, if looked at individually, don't look like Will Rogers. So it's their combined and collective presence that creates the sense of Will Rogers and the spots of color one next to another.
Right. Okay, let's take a quick look at this painting, then I want to look at some of your student work.
Okay, great. As you can see, this piece is not as reliant on the optical blending as the last piece, and the strokes are following the form more, so it's got more of a classical feel to it. It's still quite loose when you look at it up close. The paint has a nice spontaneous application. Really enjoyed the color in this one. It's not a color that would work well in just any room, especially the gladiolas, but it was so much fun to paint that I never even thought about that.
Okay, great. Now over my shoulder here we have a couple of student paintings, and these are works in progress. And
Right.
I can tell that this painting relates to this still life.
Right, I can try and duplicate the lighting a little bit there. This piece has been worked on for about 3 sessions, and this particular student is an experienced artist. His name is Max Lewis. He studied with Richard Getz in Oklahoma City, and also with some other known artists. So he's got a lot of basics behind him already. I'm working with him on Impressionism, on optical color mixing, and you can see how he's doing that in the background and in the shadow tones here.
Okay. Well, now the computer is also becoming a valuable tool for the fine artist, and it's certainly important in some of the works that you have underway right now. The computer's back in the living room, so why don't we leave the studio and go to, shall we call that your second studio?
Sure.
Okay. And I'm taking my coffee with me.
Well, Barbara, here are some other projects on my computer that I'd like to show you and share with you. This project was at St. Mary's Catholic Church in Drumright, and right here on the screen you can see a small mural. And this is my comp to show the church and the priest what it was going to look like before it was actually made. I did this with a photo retouching program, and I'm going to now shift to a closer view of this.
Herb, one thing we might tell our viewers at home is they're watching this, they're seeing a scan line that
Running
has to,
from bottom to top.
right, and that has to do with making the video of the image that's on the computer screen. So just, you don't have to deal, as you're working here every day with that line going through, that is a problem with the video and not with the computer.
No, it's not here right now for us at all.
Okay.
This is the design of the small mural closer up. This piece is based on a painting by Ferruzzi, who is an Italian painter. It was much larger. Her whole figure was in it. The baby's whole figure was in it. We decided to tighten in on the heads, and I have some photographs of it here. We won't be able to visit it today, but this is the actual piece after it was assembled. And as you can see, as you get further away from it, it seems to become more focused.
Right.
And if you were to, as I go through the photos, I'm getting closer and closer. There you can see the scale of it. This is my wife and I standing next to it, and I'm about 6 foot, so you can see this piece is roughly 10 feet by 10 feet.
All right.
And as I get even closer, you can see there the baby's face, and each little square on his face is 1 inch by 1 inch.
All right, so basically you've done a mosaic, and you planned on the computer then which square would be which color. Is that the purpose of using the computer in developing this project?
Well, I scanned the original painting, Peruzzi's painting, and split it up into squares, and then I substituted colors of available commercial tiles.
Okay.
About 50 different colors. And I had to do that by eye. It was kind of tricky because I'm comparing a piece of ceramic to a piece of light. So the translation is a bit involved. And that's really kind of what this piece is. A good way to describe it is that it is a translation. And now I'd like to move on to the plan for the mural that we will see later today, which is based on a painting by Michelangelo called The Holy Family. And again, I've cropped it differently. In his original, there are figures in the background, but I wanted a more poignant view of the piece. This is for St. Joseph's Church in Bristow. So we wanted a nice image of Joseph, and the Michelangelo piece is one of the best places to take off that we could find.
Okay, and once again, you planned it here, used commercial tile, and it became a mosaic. Now, as I understand, the members of the church actually put this mosaic up.
That's right. Part of the idea of the project, both the projects, was to involve the church members and let them take possession of the work. And I really believe that art is the province of every human being. That's a quote from Robert Henry. And this project proves it out.
Okay, well, let's pack up our camera and go to Bristow, Oklahoma, to which church again?
St. Joseph's Catholic Church.
Okay.
Hi, Barbara. Welcome to Bristow.
Thank you, Herb. Your mural is spectacular,
Well, thank you.
and it's a wonderful transition from the computer screen to the real project.
I feel like it was a successful translation with a lot of help from the people here in Bristow at St. Joseph's Parish. We put this together basically a square foot at a time, and it's roughly 11 feet high and about 18 feet wide. And as you can see, it's composed entirely of 1 inch square tile.
And those were just right off the shelf tiles. No special colors for this project.
No, these are all colors that are currently made by manufacturers.
Okay, let's talk for just a minute about the composition. It's beautiful. This is St. Joseph's Church, and it appears to me that you could not have picked a better image of Joseph than Joseph the Father.
Well, we felt that this image was particularly strong, and like I said before, it is a translation of a Michelangelo. In the original, you could see the entire figures, and there were other figures in the background. So I basically made up the background. That's mine. And then changed the color of the lighting more so from a 14th century type lighting to something a little more impressionistic. There's a nice warm and cool play going on between the light and shadow on the piece. The arrangement of the arms is one of the most successful things about Michelangelo's piece, I felt, and didn't seem to find anything that really conveyed the sense of family the way that they do there, the nice circular movement that pulls you right into Mary's face. And I also like the way that the baby's elevated above the adults, or up equal with Joseph. And that's a particularly difficult composition to come up with, I thought. And so I was really taken with Michelangelo's original composition and felt like it deserved another shot.
All right, well, let's get a little bit closer. Maybe we can give our viewers kind of a sense of scale as we walk up here. And then also as we, from this view, I think we can really see the individual tiles and how they're placed one color against the other to give that nice three-dimensional sense. And of course, I think it's really interesting how you get those curved lines out of those square edges.
That's one of the things that really fascinates me about the medium, is that with the right control of value, that is the lightness and darkness of the tile, you can give the illusion of a curve even though all you've got to work with is straight lines.
Okay, well, it really is spectacular. Now, we're almost out of time, but before we go, I want you to give us a quick impression about the church members working on this project.
Well, they were really all a delight to work with, and they took possession of the project. It was almost like barn raising.
All right.
Everyone would come and start positioning tile and on templates, and 1 square foot at a time. We assembled it, and then we had a man come out and put it up 1 square foot at a time.
Okay. So you actually had little tiny pieces, and then you went to the wall, or square foot pieces, you went to the wall.
Right. And it was a great learning experience for them, and something I think that they will appreciate more so because they got involved in it.
Wonderful. Well, it's a great project. We enjoyed being with you today, Herb. Thank you so much.
My pleasure.
For those of you at home, we appreciate your being with us for Focus on Art, as always.